Eternal fires of heaven, he began, powers inviolable, I swear by thee, as by the altars and blaspheming swords I got away from, and the gods' white bands I swore as one chosen for sacrifice. This is justice. I am justified in dropping all allegiance to the Greeks, as I had cause to hate them. I may bring into the open what they would keep dark. No laws of my own country bind me. Now, only be sure you keep your promise and keep faith. Troy, as you are kept from harm, if what I say proves true, if what I give is great and valuable, the whole hope of the Danans and their confidence in the war they started rested along in help from Pallas. Then the night came when Diomedes and the criminal Ulysses dared to raid her holy shrine. They killed the guards on the high citadel and ripped away the statue, the palladium, desecrating with bloody hands the virginal chaplets of the goddess. After that, Danann hopes waned and were undetermined, ebbing away, their strength in battle broken, the goddess now against them. This she made evident to them all with signs and portents, just as they set her statue up in camp. The eyes, cast upward, glowed with crackling flames, and sultry sweat ran down the body. Then I say it in awe. 3 times up from the ground, the apparition of the goddess rose in a lightning flash, with shield and spear trembled. Calchas divined at once that the sea crossing must be attempted in retreat. The Pergamum cannot be torn apart by Argive swords, unless and at Argos first they beg new omens, carrying homeward the divine power. Brought overseas in ships, now they are gone before the wind to the fatherland Mycenae, gone to enlist new troops and gods. They'll cross the water again and be here unforeseen. So Calchas read the portents warned by him. They set this figure up in reparation for the palladium stolen, to appease the offended power and expatriate the crime. Enormous though, he made them built the thing with timber braces towering to the sky, too big for the gates not to be hauled inside, and give the people back their ancient guardian. If any hand have here violates this gift to great Minerva, then extinction waits, not for one only, would God it were so, but for the realm of Priam and the Phrygians. If this proud offering drawn by your hand should mount into your city, then so far or as the walls of Pelops town to tide of Asia surges in war, that doom awaits our children. This fraud of Sinon, his accomplished line, won us over a tall tale, and fixed tears had captured us, whom neither Diomedes nor Larician Achilles overpowered, nor 10 long years, nor all their thousand ships. And now another sign, more fearful still, broke on our blind, miserable people, filling us with all with dread. Laocoon, acting as Neptune's priest, that day by lot was on the point of putting to the knife a massive bull before the appointed altar, when look there, from Tenedos on the calm sea, twin snakes, I shiver to recall it endlessly. Coiling, uncoiling, swarm a beast for sure, their underbellies showing as their crests, red as blood above the swell behind the glided with great undulating backs. Now came the sound of thrashed sea water foaming. Now they were on dry land, and we could see their burning eyes fiery and suffused with blood, their tongues a flicker out of hissing maws. We scattered pale and fright, but straight ahead they slid until they reached Laocoon, each snake enveloped one of his two boys, twinning about and feeding on the body. Next day ensnared the man as he ran up with weapons, coils like cables, looped and bound him twice round the middle, twice about his throat. They whipped their back scales, and their heads towered, while with both hands he fought to break the knot. Drenched in slime, his head, hands, bands black with venom, sending to heaven his appalling cries like a slash bull escaping from an altar. The fumbled axe shrugged off. The pair of snakes now flowed away and made for the highest shrines, the citadel of pitiless Minerva, where coiling they took cover at her feet under the rodier of her shield. New terrors ran in the shaking crowd. The word went round Laocoon had paid, and rightfully, for profanation of the sacred hulk, with his offending spear hurled in its flank. The offering must be hauled to its true home, they clamored. Votive prayers to the goddess must be said there. So we breached the walls and laid the city open. Everyone pitched in out to get the figure underpined with rollers, hempen lines around the neck, deadly pregnant with enemies. The horse crawled upward to the breach, and the boys and girls sang hymns around the tower rope as for joy they touched it. Rolling on, it cast a shadow over the city's heart, O fatherland. Oleum, home of God's defensive wall, renowned in war for Dardanus people. There, on the very threshold of the beach, it jarred to a halt 4 times. 4 times the arms in the belly thrown together made a sound, yet on we stove, unmindful, deaf, and blind, to place the monster on our blessed height. Then, even then, Cassandra's lips unsealed the doom to come, lips by a god's command, never believed or heeded by the Trojans. So pitiably we, for whom that day would be the last, made all our temples green with leafy festal boughs throughout the city. As heaven turned night from the ocean stream came on profound in gloom on earth and sky, and myrmidons in hiding in their home, the Teucrians lay silent, wearied out, and sleep enfolded them. The Argive fleet, drawn up in line abreast, left tornadoes through the aloft moons, friendly stillnesses, and made for the familiar shore. Flame signals shone from the command ship. Sinon, favored but by what the gods unjustly had decreed, stole out to tap the pine walls and set free the Danans in the belly. Opened wide, the horse emitted men. Gladly they dropped out of the cavern. Captains first, Thesandrus, Sthenelus, and the man of iron Ulysses, hand over hand upon the rope, Acamas, Thoas, Neoptolemus, and Prince Machaon, Menclaus, and then the master builder Epios, who designed a horse decoy. Into the darkened city, buried deep in sleep and wine, they made their way, cut the few centuries down, let in their fellow soldiers at the gate, and joined their combat companies as planned. That time of night it was when the first sleep, gift of the gods, began for ill mankind, arriving gradually, delicious rest. In sleep, in dream, Hector appeared to me, gaunt with sorrow, streaming tears, all torn as by the violent car on his death day, and black with bloody dust. He puffed out, feet cut by the rawhide thongs. Ah, God, the look of him! How changed from that proud Hector who returned to Troy wearing Achilles' armor, or that one who pitched the torches on Danaan ships, his beard all filth, his hair matted with blood, thus showing the wounds, the many wounds received outside his father's city walls. I seemed myself to weep and call upon the man in grieving speech brought from the depth of me. Light of Dardania, best hope of Troy, what kept you from us for so long, and where? From what far place, O Hector, have you come, long, long awaited, after so many deaths, O friends and brothers, after a world of pain for all our folks and all our town at last, bone weary, we behold you. What happened? What has happened to ravish your serene face? Why these wounds? He wasted no reply on my poor questions, but heaved a great sigh from his chest and said, I give up and go, child of the goddess. Save yourself out of these flames. The enemy holds the city walls, and from her height Troy falls in ruin. Fatherland and Priam have their due. If by one hand our towers could be defended, by this hand, my own, they would have been her holy things, her gods of hearth and household. Troy commends to you. Accept them as companions of your days. Go find them the great walls that one day you dedicate when you have roamed the sea. As he said this, he brought out from the sanctuary chaplets and Vesta, lady of the hearth, with her eternal fire. While I dreamed, the tumult rose with anguish in the city more and more, although Anshi's house lay in seclusion, muffled among trees. The din at the grim onset grew, and now I shook off sleep. I climbed to the rooftop, took up my ears and listened, and the sound was like the sound of grass fire makes in grain whipped by a south wind, or a torrent foaming out of a mountainside to strew in ruined fields happy crops, the yield of ploughing teams, or woodlands borne off in the flood. In the wonder the shepherd listens on a rocky peak. I knew that what our trust had won for us, knew the Danaan fraud. Deiphobus, great house in flames, already caving in under the overpowering god of fire. Eucalin, Euc, Eucaligons, already caught nearby. The glare lightning, the straits beyond Sigium, the cries of men, the wild calls of the trumpets. To arm was my first maddened impulse. Not that anyone had fighting chance in arms, only I burned to gather up some force for combat and to man some high redoubt. So fury drove me, and it came to me that meeting death was beautiful in arms. Then here, eluding the Archean spears, came Panthus, Orpheus' son, priest of Apollo, carrying holy things, our conquered gods, and pulling a small grandchild along. He ran despairing to my doorway. Where's the crux, Panthus? I said. What strong point shall we hold? Before I could say more, he groaned and answered, the last day of Darnia has come, the hour not to be fought of any longer. Trojans we have been. Ilium has been. The glory of the Teucrians is no more. Black Jupiter has passed it on to Argos. Greeks are the masters in our burning city, tall as a cliff. Set in the heart of town, their horse pours out armed men to conquer a polluting Sinon breeze. New conflagrations. Troops hold the gates, as many thousand men as ever came from great Mycenae. Others block the lanes with crossbears glittering in a combat line. Sword blades are drawn for slaughter. Even the first guards at the gates can barely offer battle or blindly make a stand. Impelled by these words, by the powers of heaven, into the flames I go, into the fight, where the harsh fury and the din and shouting, skyward rising calls crossing my path in moonlight. Five fell in with me companions, Ripheus and Epitus, a great soldier, Hypanis, Dymas, cleaving to my side with young Corobus, Magdon's son. It happened that in those very days this man had come to Troy aflame with passion for Cassandra, bringing to Priam and the Phrygians, a son-in-law's right hand, unlucky one to have been deaf to what his bride foretold. Now when I saw them grouped on edge for battle, I took it all in and said briefly, soldiers, brave as you are to no end, if you crave to face the last fight with me, and no doubt of it, how matters stand for us, each one can see the gods by whom this kingdom stood agone. Gone from the shrines and altars, you defend the city lost in flames. Come, let us die. We'll make a rush into the thick of it. The conquered have one safety, hope for none. The desperate odds doubled their fighting spirit from that time on, like predatory wolves in fog and darkness, when a savage hunger drives them blindly on, and cubs in lairs lie waiting with dry famished jaws. Just so, through arrow fights and enemies, we ran towards our sure death, straight from the city's heart. Cavernous black nights over and round us. Who can describe the havoc of that night, or tell the deaths, or tally wounds with tears? The ancient city falls after dominion, many long years, in windrows on the streets, in homes, on solemn porches of the gods. Dead bodies lie, and not alone the Trojans pay the price with their heart's blood. At times manhood returns to fire, even the conquered, and Danaan conquerors fall. Grief everywhere, everywhere terror, and all shapes of death. Androgeos with the first to cross our path, leading a crowd of Greeks. He took for granted that we were friends and hailed us cheerfully. Men, get a move on. Are you made of lead to be so late and slow? The rest are busy carrying plunder from the fires and towers. Are you just landed from the ships? His swords were barely our, and no reply forthcoming. Credible to him when he knew himself fallen among enemies, thunder sticks struck. He halted, foot and voice, and then recoiled like one who steps down on a lurking snake in a briar patch and jerks back, terrified as the angry thin rears up, all puffed and blue. So backward went Androgeos in panic. We were all over them in a moment, cut and thrust, and as they fought on unknown ground, startled, unnerved, we killed them everywhere. So fortune filled our sails at first. Coroebus, elated at our fate, and his own courage, said, friends, come follow fortune. She has shown the way to safety, shown she's on our side. We'll take their shields and put on their insignia. Trickery, bravery, who ask in war, the enemy will arm us. He put on the plumed helm of Androgeos, took the shield with blazon and the Greek sword to his side. Ripheus, Dymas, all were pleased to do it, making the still fresh trophies our equipment. Then we went on, passing among the Greeks, protected by our own gods. Now no longer many a combat hand to hand. We fought in the black night, and many a Greek we sent to Orcus. There were some who turned and ran back to the ships and shores. Some shamefully clambered again into the horse to hide in the familiar punch. When gods are contrary, they stand by no one. Here before us came Cassandra, Priam's virgin daughter, dragged by her long hair unto Minerva's shrine, lifting her brilliant eyes in vain to heaven, her eyes alone, as her white hands were bound. Coroebus, infuriated, could not bear it, but plunged into the midst to find his death. We all went after him, our swords at play, but here first from the temple Gabel's height, we meet a hail of missiles from our friends, pitiful execution by their error, who thought us Greek from our Greek plumes and shields. Then, with a groan of anger, seeing the Virgin wrested from them, Danaans from all sides rallied and attacked us. Fiery Ajax, Atreus' son, Dolopians in a mass, as when a cyclone breaks, conflicting winds will come together, west wind, south wind, east wind, riding high out of the dawn lands, forests behind bend and roar, and raging all in spume. Nereus with his trident churns the deep. Then some whom we had taken by surprise under cover of night throughout the city and drove off came back again. They knew our shields and arms for liars now, our speech alien to their own. They overwhelmed us. Corybus fell at the warrior's goddess altar, killed by Peneleus, and Ripheus fell, a man uniquely just among the Trojans, the soul of equity, but the gods who have it differently. Hypanis Dymas died, shut down by friends, nor did your piety, Panthus, nor Apollo's fillets shield you as you went down. Ashes to Elam, flames that consume my people. Here I swear that in your downfall I did not avoid our weapon, one exchange with the Danans, and if it had been fated, my own hand had earned my death, but we were torn from that place, Iphitus and Peleus too. One slow with age, one wounded by Ulysses, called by a clamor at the hall of Priam. Truly we found here a prodigious fight, as though there were none elsewhere, not a death in the whole city. Mars gone berserk, Danans in rush to scale the roof, the gate besieged by tortoise shell of overlapping shields. Ladders clung to the wall, and men strove upward before the very doorposts on the rungs, left hand putting the shield up and the right reaching for the cornice. The defenders wrenched out upper works and rough tiles, these for missiles as they saw the end, preparing to fight back even on the edge of death, and gilded beams, ancestral ornaments they rolled down on the head below. In hall others with swords drawn held the entrance wall, packed there waiting. Now we pluck it up hard to help the royal house, to give our men a respite and to add our strength to theirs, though all were beaten. And we had for entrance a rear door, secret given on a passage between the palace halls in our days. Andromage, poor lady, often used it, going alone to see her husband parents or taking Astyanax to his grandfather. I climbed high on the roof where hopeless men were picking up and throwing futile missiles. Here was a tower like a promontory rising towards the stars above the roof. Old Troy, the Danaan ships, the Archean camp were visible from this, now close beside it with crowbars where the flooring made loose joints. We pried it from its bed and pushed it over, down with a rending crash in sudden ruin wide over the Danaan lines, and it fall. But fresh troops moved over, and the rain of stone with every kind of missile never ceased. Just at the outer doors of the vestibule sprang Pyrrhus, all in bronze and glittering as a serpent hidden swollen underground by a cold water, writhers into the light on vile grass fed, his old skin cast away, renewed and glossy, rolling slippery coils with lifted underbelly rearing sunward, and Triple Town a flicker close behind him, giant Peripass and Automedon, his armor-bearer, once Achilles' driver, besieged the place with all the young of Cyprus, hurling their torches at the palace roof. Pyrrhus, shouldering forward with an axe, broke down the stony threshold, forced apart hinges, brazen door jambs, and chopped through one panel of the door, splitting the oak to make a window, a great breach. And there, before their eyes, the inner halls lay open, the courts of Priam, and the ancient kings with men at arms ranked in the vestibule. From the interior came sounds of weeping, pitiful commotion, wails of women high pitched, rising in the formal chambers to ring against the silent golden stars. And through the palace, mothers wild with fright ran to and fro, or cling to doors and kissed them. Paris with his father's brawn stormed on. No bolts or bars or men availed to stop him. Under the battering, the double doors were torn out of their sockets and fell inward. Sheer force cleared the way. The Greeks broke through into the vestibule, cut down the guards, and made the wide hall seethe with men at arms, a tumult greater than when dikes are burst, and a foaming river swirling out in flood whelms every parapet and races on through fields and over all the lowland plains, bearing off pen and cattle. I myself saw Neoptolemus furious with blood in the entrance way, and saw the two Atridae, Hecuba I saw, and her 100 daughters Priam before the altars, with his blood drenching the fires that he himself had blessed. Those 50 bridal chambers, hope of a line so flourishing, those doors high and proud, adorned with taking a barbaric gold, were all brought low. Fire had them or the Greeks. What was the fate of Priam, you may ask, seeing a city captive, seeing his own royal portals rent apart, his enemies in the inner rooms, the old man uselessly put on his shoulders, shaken with old age, armor unused for years, belted a sword on, and made for the masked enemy to die. Under the open sky in the central court stood a big altar. Near it, a laurel tree of great age, leaning over in deep shade, embowered the penates. At this altar, Hecuba and her daughters, like white doves blown down in a black storm, clung together, enfolding holy images in their arms. Now seeing Priam in a young man's gear, she cried out, "My poor husband, what mad thought drove you to buckle on these weapons? Where are you trying to go? The time is past for help like this, for this kind of defending. Even in my own, if my own Hector could be here, come to me now. The altar will protect us, or else you'll die with us." She drew him close, heavy with years, and made a place for him to rest on the consecrated stone. Now see, Pelops, one of Priam's sons, escaped from Pyrrhus' butchery, and on the run through enemies and spears, down colonnades, through empty courtyards, wounded. Close behind comes Pyrrhus, burning for the death stroke, has him, catches him now, and launches with the spear. The body has reached his parents, and before them goes down, pouring out his life with blood. Now Priam, in the very midst of death, would neither hold his peace nor spare his anger. "For what you've done, for what you've dared," he said, you if there is care in heaven for atrocity, may the gods render fitting thanks, reward you as you deserve. You forced me to look on at the destruction of my son, defiled father's eye with that great Achilles you claim to be the son of you, and you lie, was not like you to Priam, his enemy, to me, who threw myself upon his mercy. He showed compunction. Give me back for burial the bloodless corpse of Hector, and returned me to my own realm. The old man threw his spear with feeble impact, blocked by the ringing bronze. It hangs there harmless from the jutting bows. Then Pyrrhus answered, "You'll report the news to Pylades, my father. Don't forget my sad behavior, the degeneracy of Neptolemus. Now die with this." To the altar step itself he dragged him, trembling, slipping in the pooled blood of his son, and took him by the hair with his left hand. The sword flashed in his right. Up to the hilt he thrust it in his body. That was the end of Priam's age, the doom that took him off with Troy in flames before his eyes. His towers had headlong fallen. He that in other days had ruled in pride so many lands and peoples, the power of Asia on the distant shores, the vast trunk headless lies without a name. Or the first time that for the first time that night, inhuman shuddering took me head to foot. I stood unmanned, and my dear father's image came to mind as our king, just his age, mortally wounded, gasped his life away before my eyes. Crusa came to mind too, left alone, the whole house plundered, danger to little Iulus. I looked around to take stock of my men, but all had left me utterly played out, giving their beaten bodies to the fire or plunging from the roof. It came to this that I stood there alone, and then I saw lurking beyond the doorsill of the Vesta, in hiding silent, in that place reserved the daughter of a Tyndareus, glare of fires lighted my steps this way and that, my eyes glancing over the whole scene everywhere, that woman terrified of the Trojans' hate for the city overthrown, terrified too of Danaan vengeance for abandoned husbands, anger after years, Helen, that fury both to her, our own homeland, and Troy had gone to earth, a hated thing, before the altars. Now fires blazed up in my own spirit, a passion to avenge my fallen town and punish Helen's whorishness. Shall this one look untouched on Sparta and Mycenae after her triumph, going like a queen, and see her home and husband, kind and children, with Trojan girls for escort, Phrygian slaves? Must Priam perish by the sword for this? Troy burn for this? Dardanella, littoral, be soaked in blood so many times for this? Not by my leave, I know. No glory comes of punishing a woman. Defeat can bring no honor. Still, I'll be approved for snuffing out a monstrous life, for a just sentence carried out. My heart will teem with joy in the avenging fire, and the ashes of my kin will be appeased. So ran my thoughts. I turned wildly upon her, but at the moment clear before my eyes, never before a clear in a pure light, stepping before me, radiant through the night. My loving mother came, immortal, tall and lovely as the lords of heaven know her. Catching me by the hand, she held me back, then with her rose-red mouth reproved me. Son, why let such suffering goad you on to fury? Past control, where in your thoughtfulness for me, for us, will you not be revisit the place you left your father worn and old, or find out in your wife Crusa's life and the young boy Ascanius, all these cut off by Greek troops for raging everywhere? Had I not cared for this, fire would be now have taken them, their blood clotted the sword. You must not hold the woman of Laconia, that hated face, the cause of this, not Paris, nor Paris, the harsh will of the god. It is the gods that overthrows the splendor of this place and bring Troy from her height into the dust. Look over there, I'll tear away the cloud that curtains you and films your mortal sight. The fog around you, have no fear of doing your mother's will or balk at obeying her. Look where you see high masonry thrown down, stone torn from stones, with billowing smoke and dust. Neptune is shaken from their beds, the walls that his great trident pried up, undermining, toppling the whole city down. And look, Juno, in all her savagery, holds the Cian's gate, and raging in steel armor calls her allied army from the ships up on the citadel. Took look, Pallas Tritonia, couch in a storm cloud lightning with her Gorgon. The Father himself empowers the Danans, urges assault. God's honor the defenders away, child. Put on end to toiling, so I shall be near to see you safely home. She hid herself in the deep gloom of night, and now the dire forms appeared to me of great immortals, enemies of choice. I knew the end then. Ilium was going down in fire, the Troy of Neptune going down as in high mountains when the countrymen have notched an ancient ash then make their axes ring with might and main, chopping away to fell the trees over the point of falling, shaking through all its foliage, and the treetop nodding bit by bit. The strokes prevail until it gives the final groan at last and crashes down in ruin from the height. Now I descended where the goddess guided, clear of the flames and clear of enemies, for both retired. So gained my father's door, my ancient home. I looked for him at once, my first wish being to help him to the mountains, but with Troy gone to set his face against it, not to prolong his life or suffer exile. The rest of you, all in your prime, he said, make your escape. You are still hale and strong. If heaven's Lord had wished me a longer span, they would have saved this home for me. I call it more than enough that once before I saw my city taken and wrecked and went on living. Here is my deathbed. Here, take leave of me. Depart now. I'll find death with my sword arm. The enemy will oblige, they'll come for spoils. Burial can be dispensed with. All these years I've lingered in my impotence. It's at odds with heaven, since the Father of gods and men breathed high winds of thunderbolt upon me and touched me with his fire. He spoke on in the same vein, inflexible. The rest of us, Crusa and Ascanius, and the servants begged him in tears not to pull down with him our lives as well, adding his own death weight to the fate's pressure, but he would not budge. He held to his resolve and to his chair. I felt swept off again to fight in misery, longing for death. What choices now were open? What chance had I? Did you suppose, my father, that I could tear myself away and leave you? Unthinkable. How could a father say it? Now, if it please the powers above, above that nothing stand of this great city, if your heart I set on adding your own death and ours to that of Troy, the doors wide open for it. Pyrrhus will be here, splashed with Priam's blood. He kills the son before his father's eyes. The father at the altars, my dear mother, was it for this? Through spears and fire, you brought me to see the enemy deep in my house, to see my son Ascanius, my father, and near them both Crusa butchered in one another's blood. My gear, men, bring my gear. The last light calls the conquered. Give me back to the Greeks. Let me take up the combat once again. We shall not all die this day unavenged. I buckled on sword belt and blade and slid my left forearm into the shield strap, turning to go out. But at the door, Crusa hugged my knees, then held up little Iulus to his father. If you are going out to die, take us to face the whole thing with you. If experience leads you to put some hope in weaponry such as you now take, guard your own house here when you have gone. To whom is Iulus left? Your father, wife? One called that long ago. She went on, and her wailing filled the house. But then a sudden Putin came a marvel amid his parents' hands and their sad faces. A point on Iulus' head seemed to cast light, a tongue of flame that touched but did not burn him, licking his fine hair, playing around his temples. We, in panic, beat at the flaming hair and put the sacred fire out with water. Father Anchises lifted his eyes to heaven and lifted up his hands, his voice in joy. Omnipotent Jupiter, if prayers affect you, look down upon us. That is all I ask. If by devotion to the gods we earn it, grant us a new sign and confirm this portent. The old man barely finished with it, thundered a loud crack on the left. Out of the sky, through depth of night, a star fell, trailing flame, and guided on. Turning the light to day, we watched it pass above the roof and go to hide its glare, its trace in Ida's wood, but still behind the luminous furrow shone, and wide zones fumed with sulphur. My father, overcome, addressed the gods and rose in worship of the blessed star. Now, no more delay. I'll follow you where you conduct me. There'll be, gods of my father, preserve this house, preserve my grandson, yours. This portent was Troy's life in your power. I yielded. I go as your companion, son. There he shall be. He was still. We heard the blazing town crackle more loudly, felt the scorching heat. Then come, dear father, arms around my neck. I'll take you on my shoulders. No great weight, whatever happens, both will face one danger, find one's safety. Aeolus will come with me, my wife at a good interval behind. Servants, give your attention to what I say. At the gate inland, there's a funeral mound and old shrine of Ceres the Berry Fit. Near it, on ancient cypress, kept alive for many years by our father's piety. By various routes, we'll come to that one place. Father, carry out the earth gods, our penalties, our penance. It would be wrong for me to handle them, just come from such hard fighting, bloody work until I wash myself in running water. When I had said this over my breadth of shoulder and bent neck, I spread out a lion skin for tawny cloak and stooped to take his weight. Then little Iulus put his hand in mine and came with shorter steps besides his father. My mother fell in behind. Through shadows placed on we went, and I, lately unmoved by any spears thrown,